Complications from COVID-19. His family says that Colin Powell was treated at Walter Reed National Medical Center after he became ill, although they want us all to know he was fully vaccinated. Nancy Cordes is following this story from the White House. Nancy, good morning to you. I realize this story is just breaking, but have you heard anything about how long he had been in the hospital?
We are getting some new details, Gail, courtesy of our Pentagon correspondent, David Martin, who says that Powell's wife, Alma, also contracted COVID-19, but she responded well to Regeneron. She, too, had been fully vaccinated, so she had a breakthrough case as well. David also tells us that Colin Powell, who, as you mentioned, was 84 years old, had battled various other ailments, including Parkinson's disease, so that may have made him more vulnerable when he got this breakthrough case of COVID. Colin Powell, such a unique figure here in Washington, someone whose counsel was sought by presidents of both parties, who was encouraged to run for president himself by both parties, served as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Secretary of State, a four-star general whose parents immigrated here from Jamaica. He will be deeply missed here in Washington, someone who was so respected, really such a singular figure to be respected by both sides in that way.
Yeah, Nancy, thank you very much. I want to bring in John Dickerson, chief political analyst for CBS News. John, I know Colin Powell is going to be claimed by Washington, D.C. He's also a New York story, a product of public schools here, born in Harlem, raised in the South Bronx, went to City College, the great City College. But when we think about his legacy in Washington, where he spent most of his professional career, what stands out to you?
Well, Tony, I think what stands out is he bridged the period from the end of the Cold War into the age of terrorism. So he served under Ronald Reagan and George Herbert Walker Bush, and then served under George W. Bush, Reagan and Herbert Walker Bush, of course, presiding over the end of the Cold War, and then George W. Bush fighting the first two wars of the Age of Terror, and of course that central role that Colin Powell played in front of the United Nations, making the case that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. And so that will be, he also has, of course, a political legacy, arguing increasingly during the Obama administration and then ultimately endorsing President Obama that the Republican Party had strayed from its original principles, and he became quite vocal about that at the end of his life.
John, he was widely respected on both sides of the aisle, and as you know, that is very difficult to do. How was he able to do that, do you think?
Well, you're right, Gail. I mean, he was one of a dwindling number of what we used to call wise men, and those were people, particularly coming out of the foreign policy arena. There used to be more of a consensus in American political life where Republicans and Democrats kind of believed on the same set of basic principles, and that was largely because it was focused on the common enemy of Russia during the Cold War. As that started to break down, and as partisanship became a more part of our life, really calcified partisanship, the number of figures like Colin Powell, Secretary Gates, former Secretary of Defense would be another you'd think of. I think Colin Powell, it starts really, as Tony mentioned, in his American story. His autobiography was called My American Journey, and he was the embodiment of the American promise, that America is an idea that no matter where you are born and what your skin color was, of course, the most important thing about his service as Secretary of State was that he was the first African-American Secretary of State, that you could grow up and go through public schools and public college and reach those levels in America. That was the foundation of his story, and it's what makes his personal biography so central to what you're talking about, Gail, which is the respect that he received on both sides of the aisle, in addition, of course, to his service and the fact that he basically served in every of the top posts: chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Secretary of State, National Security Advisor. He was in the thick of it for a very long part.
John, you mentioned that he was highly decorated and highly respected. Of course, the first African-American to serve Secretary of State. How much of that has opened up doors for people of color in those positions?
Well, I think it has. He was, of course, followed by another African-American Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice. And what Powell talked about and always both lived and talked about was the fact that the military was the place to look for those who were judged by their attributes, that it was a colorblind institution, and that America, when it was seeking in other institutions to improve its record on race and improve the way that Americans were brought into the American dream, that it should look to the military. And so in both the way he talked and in his life, he proved that there were institutions in America where through your talent and skills, and regardless of your birth and skin color, you could rise. And so he was both an advocate in his positions, but also in the way he lived his life and in the way he talked about what was possible in America for those who were, for Black Americans or any Americans of color.
I have to say, John, when I got the news, this one really hurts. It just seemed to come out of the blue. I know he was 84. But I think many people didn't even know that he was sick or certainly in the hospital. You interviewed him many times. I can say I got to know him a little bit. He had a great sense of humor. That's what I'll remember about him. You've interviewed him many times. What are your thoughts about him? What do you think we should all remember?
Well, he had a self-deprecate. He had a very quick laugh and self-deprecating humor. One of the stories, he was known in part for his lessons of leadership, and we're familiar with those people who do well in life have his lessons of leadership, which I'll give you a couple of them. They were get mad, then get over it. One of them was it ain't as bad as you think, and share credit is one of my favorites, of course, because we are in a political world now where sharing credit is doesn't happen much. But he told stories at his own expense. He made fun of himself, and that kind of attribute is pretty rare in public life from people who achieve great heights.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you. We really appreciate you getting on the phone so quickly. I like get mad and get over it and share credit. Listen, we could all use. Our coverage will continue on our 24-hour streaming network, that's CBSN. And of course, you can watch it at cbsnews.com or on our CBS News app.